so I've always been the kind of person that wanted the spotlight on me. I'm one of those guys that when the spotlight is on me, and that spotlight shifts to somebody else, I become the guy running behind them, making distracting gestures, trying to get the attention all the time. I dated one girl during high school and intended to marry her. But after we graduated, she went off to college and broke up with me. It really devastated me. I was shattered. And at the age of 19, I had my first beer. I don't remember much of that night. I do know I had 2 beers, and that's all I remember of it. I don't think it's a result of blacking out, passing out, or anything like that. I just don't remember much of it. That was quite a while back. My story discloses in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. The reason I have to do this in a general way is because I don't remember most of what I did. I really can't remember a lot of my drinking years. There are periods of that time that are very vague. I took my first drink at the age of 19 and drank for the next 30 years. So I guess you might say I started drinking after puberty and couldn't stop till after adultery. But nevertheless, I started drinking at the age of 19. There's nothing I don't think particularly strange about it. It's normal stuff. Driving across the state line because I was underage and hitting the clubs over there, but nothing unusual. However, around the age of 20 years old, I was jailed again. The first time I was jailed was for theft. The second time I was jailed, I was coming back from Ohio and got pulled over for speeding. The officer realized I'd been drinking and I was drunk, so he put me in jail. He didn't charge me with anything to do with alcohol. He just charged me for speeding, but he put me in jail so I wouldn't drive home. I was attending a tool and die machinist trade school at the time and became an engineering draftsman. I did this for approximately 5 years. As soon as I graduated from trade school, I started moonlighting as a bartender at the age of 21. I got laid off from my engineering job, so I switched careers and became a bar manager. This is when my drinking really took off. Again, it was kind of a perfect job for a guy like me because of the attention I always wanted. Everybody seems to love a smart aleck bartender. I seem to have mastered the art of being a smart aleck as far back in my childhood as I can remember. Both my boss and I had developed a tolerance for alcohol that seemed to have enabled us to pretty much outdrink anybody who had come into our nightclub. We used to have some pretty big bands from Las Vegas, Chicago, Louisville, Kentucky, places like that. Of course, that's when we did most of our partying after the place had closed. We did a lot of hellacious drinking and pot smoking. Both the state police and city police liked to hang out at our club on their off hours. Many of them would come over to our apartment on Sunday to get a case of beer because you couldn't buy carry-out on Sundays. It never seemed to bother them when they noticed a bag of weed on our coffee table. They'd stop by the club on Monday to replace the case of beer they borrowed. I used to joke over the years when people would ask me if I drank. I'd say, well, not since they invented the funnel. But the truth is, that was real. We used to close the bar at night and we'd take the funnel out of the sink, stick it in our mouths and stick our head under the tapper to see how long we could guzzle beer. I used to keep my head under there until I had tears running out of my eyes. But I always seemed to be the one who won. I had a tendency to drink a lot because of my fears. I was afraid of people, and I was afraid of relationships. You would never know that to know me. I always seemed like a very courageous individual, not afraid to talk to people and so forth. But that's where the joking comes in. Many times clowns are trying to hide something, and it's usually their emotions. That's the kind of person I am. I was afraid of women, especially after being broke up with. I had a hard time talking to women, so I had to drink myself into oblivion. Even when I'd go out to clubs and so forth, and I wanted to ask a girl to dance, I had a hard time doing that. I had to be drunk to do that. It's awfully strange, you know. I'd sit there at the bar, and I could get up from the bar and walk over to a table of guys. I would stand straight up at the table and talk to them, just like normal. But when I went over to ask a lady to dance, it was different. As soon as I got off that stool, it seemed like the whole room became quiet, just like E.F. Hutton was there or something. I thought you could hear me walking across the carpet. Clump, clump, clump. And whenever I got to her table, I didn't stand straight up. I always bent over, because I was afraid of rejection. I used to ask ladies to dance, and if they said no, I'd stand straight up and loudly say, "I didn't say dance, I said I shit my pants." Anything I could do to keep from embarrassing myself. During those years as a bar manager, I did a lot of heavy drinking. I'm not sure exactly how much, but I'm pretty sure it was at least a case of beer and a quart of cc a day, and probably every couple of days a bag of pot. I spent several years in the nightclub business, but I went through a lot of experiences that were hard for me to deal with. You see, in the first place, I'm a coward, so I had to hire big people to work with me, because you get into a lot of bar fights and that sort of thing. I remember a lot of times they would get a troublemaker out in the hall. I'd go out and start smacking them around, kicking them, that sort of thing, trying to make an example out of them. So there were a lot of things that I did I'm not proud of today, but that's just the way it was. I can remember I was about to get a promotion one night. My boss came up to me and said, "Tomorrow you're being promoted. You're being promoted from the bar manager to the food and beverage manager. So we're going out to celebrate tonight." I said, "I can't do that. This is a busy night. I need 3 bartenders here, and I'm scheduled to work. I can't leave." He said, "Oh, yes, you can. I called one of your other bartenders in. We're going out. We're going to see who can outdrink each other." And we did. We went out and hit a lot of different bars that night. This is a person who always thrived on attention. I loved that life. I loved that business because I got a lot of attention. The first year I was bartending, I used to serve people drinks with my index finger sticking in the middle of their drink. For over a year of doing that, I had one guy who refused to drink it, because people would come in and see that kind of nonsense, and it would shock them. They would think it was so bizarre, they couldn't do anything but just sit there and crack up laughing. They loved to come in and get entertained by me. That's probably not such a good thing for a person with such an insane humor as mine. But we went out that night, and we commenced to party hardy. I don't remember most of the places we went, but the one place I do remember was a nightclub called the Cat's Meow. The Cat's Meow was one of only 2 big competitors we had. I worked at least 80 hours a week or more, so I really never got much time off. We walked into the Cat's Meow, and they were standing there collecting the cover charge. But when I walked up there, the guy said, Nah, just go on in." So I went in there. They used to call me Duffy back then. And I walked in there, and I started hearing people at their tables whispering, "There's Duffy, there's Duffy." The next thing I knew, I started receiving a standing ovation, and it scared the crap out of me. As soon as we got to our table, I did nothing but drench myself in booze, because I was scared to death. A whole room of 200 or 300 people that I knew none of them, and they all seemed to know me. It scared me to death. Well, we ended up closing that place up, and then went back to our own club to join in on the after-hours party. By that time, my boss was really drunk, really wasted. He passed out in one of the booths for a while and finally woke up. He got up and said something to me. I don't even remember what it was now, but it really ticked me off. It broke me down. I started crying right there at the bar, and I threw my keys on the bar and I said, I quit. I was to be promoted that same day. But I did quit, and one of the waitresses I was seeing at the time quit her other day job, and she and I took off and went to Florida. We lived down there about 7 months. I continued to drink. I was married to her for 5 years with the same process going on, drinking, working bartending jobs. Finally, GE called me back. Financially, things started to look better. But with my drinking and everything, she finally got fed up. She found someone else, and after 5 years, she divorced me. It was at this point then that my drinking probably hit its worst. I had to move out of the house, and I moved into a duplex that we owned. The duplex that we owned was finished downstairs, but the upstairs wasn't. Well, I ended up having to live in the upstairs apartment. No heat. I lived in there 2 winters without any heat. But it didn't matter. I was drunk all the time. I lived very close to 3 bars. I'd hit them every night and started to get into trouble with GE. They were concerned about my drinking, so they sent me to counseling. During those years as a nightclub manager, I had several accidents, some of them pretty serious. Fortunately, I lived through them. I never got arrested for these accidents because the cops always hung out at the nightclub. So whenever an accident like that would happen, all I had to do was make a phone call, and they'd have my car towed away and I'd never be charged with an accident. My insurance covered damages, and I got off scot-free. I heard a guy speak at a meeting one time, and he talked frequently about skating by with a lot of things in his life. I related to that, because the same was true for me. There were so many accidents I have had that I could have been arrested for, and I didn't even get a ticket.